I'm I'm mobile a lot, and so you can see I'm in my vehicle today, en route to another location. So I've got some teammates on here with me. I've got Kelly Williams. She works with me along with Nathaniel White, and so I appreciate the intro. Let's just jump right in, Kelly, to our slides, and I'll tell you a little bit about our insurance group. So, BancFirst Insurance Services was started in '04. We are a part of a publicly traded bank called BancFirst Holding Company, based out of Oklahoma. So we like to tell everybody we're a public company, but we're very closely held. A lot of our stock resides in our company itself with our employees. So we as a bank will do sometimes they look for investment opportunities, and they looked for an option to have a some non-interest income generation, and so they bought an independent insurance agency in '04. In '07 they purchased another agency, which is um, my former CEO's agency, and who was also still works with us in a consulting role. And then in '08 I joined the organization. They purchased my book of business and brought me on, and so we have built this organization over almost 20 years. We're a top 100 agency in the country. We are what they call best practices, which means we are very organizationally sound, in our our balance sheet with our bank means we're very strong and secure. So 100 plus employees. We're based in Oklahoma, and we have a location here in Dallas. We write business in, I would tell you, over 40 states, and internationally as well. We write things all over the globe. So we really have a lot of bandwidth to serve a wide array of business clients. And while we don't focus quite as much on personal insurance, we do a lot of the personal insurance for our business clients. So we like to say, successful people, we high net worth clients, we do a lot of their personal lines, and things the more complex it is, the better we like it. So Kelly, I'm seeing, so this is our Texas team. We have a we've got an office of professionals ranging from all across the spectrum. These are our producers, what we call producers, and our account managers. And on the solutions of things, what do we do? Well, you can see our list here, I believe. I mean, we do everything from builder's risk to business auto insurance to, directors and officers liability. If you set on boards or you have boards, we do surety bonds. Actually, the way that I met Ravi Polischetti was over a construction project where I was referred in to help with the surety bond. And so, we underwrite surety bonds. We do, everything from general liability to really anything you can think of where you have a business need. We do it. And, to include some things that have become hot buttons nowadays are, you know, things like cyber coverage, cyber liability, cyber crimes have become a real thorn in a lot of people's sides, and so that's an area that has become a real hot item, hot topic. And there's so we're looking at this. It says what your insurance policy isn't telling you. Um, we run into this a lot. Everybody assumes that they're protected for everything, and that's not always the case. It takes a risk advisor. And the reason that we think that our education's important is it helps us be better advisors to business people. We ask a lot of questions, and we help our clients identify coverage gaps. I will tell you a situation I've been dealing with today. I've been working on an account today. These guys build about 500 single family homes a year, and they assumed they had coverage for everything, to include they got a lawsuit, and one of their tenants in one of their rental dwellings said, "Hey, I've gotten sick because you guys had water leaks in this house and you didn't get them fixed on a timely basis, and it created mold." Well, they go to file a claim and hand us the lawsuit, and most policies, if you look at them, have a total mold exclusion for bodily injury and property damage. Well, for somebody who's got over 300 rental houses in a portfolio, or somebody who has a ton of multifamily, that's a problem. And so we are risk advisors. We do consultative selling. We sit down and go, tell us about your business. And in that particular case, I picked this account up. I didn't write it, but I'm trying to help them. They could have written some pollution coverage to solve that, but that's the thing an independent insurance agent will sit down and ask questions about to try to figure out how to help. And that's why we always talk to people and say, "Hey, when's the last time that you had a review?" If you haven't had an insurance review, if you're a business, if you are thinking about opening a company, or you've got an insurance package and you haven't looked it over in a few years, good chance that there's a gap there. And so, that would be our call to help you. Things, what kind of things can create gaps. Let's just say you've got a piece of property and you've had it for a number of years and you haven't really updated the values. Well, property values have went up, and when you don't keep up with it on coverage changes, a lot of times somebody will have a property and they've got it insured for $1 million, and it's really worth $1.5 million, and they think they're going to get paid on it, what they've got listed, and they find out about this thing called co-insurance. And it's it's always bad to find these things out after the fact, because you don't have any way to fix them. And that's, we've got a line item on there on our slideshow of inflation and rising replacement costs. That's exactly something I'm talking about. Another thing that I see all the time is folks start businesses and they don't let us know the names. And so if we don't have a named insured properly listed, there's no coverage. If you are sued in that name and we don't have it listed on a policy and we don't know about it, then there's no coverage. And so we want insurance policies to work for somebody. We want to sell you something that is there when you need it. A lot of times when your business is growing and you're expanding, sometimes we're the last person to know, and we should really be near the front. When you're doing planning with your CPA and your lawyers, we should really be in that. So, Kelly's got a slide on here, the dangerous assumption. I have insurance, so I'm covered. And that is just exactly what I'm talking about. Finding a gap after a claim, it's too late. And that's part of our mission. And what we want your group to understand is there's a lot of gaps, but there's ways to shore those gaps up. And so I'm not sure what the question and answer part looks like, but if anybody has got a question right now, I would sure take it. So Kelly's got our kind of our approach. Our approach is uncover exposures, and then we do that by reviewing. We review financial statements. We review your current insurance policies. We sit down and ask questions. Try to understand what your business is, and then if you're going into a different area, we can always help you decide what you need. So some other areas that we work in, everybody, we do benefits insurance. So we're property, casualty, personal lines, group health insurance, life insurance. We've got a specialist in our agency for every area of the insurance piece. The things that we don't do is we don't do retirement plans. We don't set up 401ks. We don't do any kind of retirement plans. And nowadays our group benefits component also includes an HR component. We have a lot of what I would call value addeds, that if you guys say, hey, we really need help with an employee handbook, we've got a program that we can give you a template to help set that up and assist you with it. So what do we got next, Kelly, on our slide? So this is a QR code, and we want you guys to reach out to us. We will set an appointment. We'd love to help you with a second opinion. I tell everybody all the time, you ought to get a second opinion if you have not had one in a while. This is just like a checkup, and we're happy to help. We very rarely ever find a situation that we think is exactly the way it should be, and we're always able to help somebody. So I will sure. I think there were some questions maybe to answer. We can go right to that, and anybody's got anything they want to know, just let me know. I'm happy to answer.
Yeah, thank you, Ron, for the great session. So, yes, guys, if you have any of the question related to BancFirst Insurance or insurances in general, you can drop it in the chat, and you can just unmute your mic. Until then, I can ask some questions, Ron.
Perfect.
Yeah. So, about the business, so what is the most common coverage gap you see when you review a client's existing policy for the first time? Like you have listed some, but what is the most common one?
The most common thing I see is not having the correct named insureds listed on a policy. In other
Mhm.
words, you've got a policy, but you don't pay attention to exactly the way your name or your corporation is listed, and you think you have coverage, and you're paying for coverage, but an insurance company will deny your claim if you're sued and they don't have the proper named insured on there. That's something that I see all the time. A common coverage gap that I'm seeing right now is the lack of cyber liability coverage. Cyber
Okay.
liability is um, it's everywhere. We're owned by a bank. We have a lot of exposure to cyber crime, and that comes in all forms, guys. It comes in, if you do electronic commerce, ACHs, um, there's funds transfer fraud. There's all kinds of, if you run a pretty good sized payroll and you have, you know, the ability to have folks, hold you ransom when they can take over your systems. I mean, we've seen multiples and multiples of situations where thieves are getting in between emails and fraudulently stealing money through fraudulent wires, etc.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Also, another question I had is like you work across both commercial and personal insurance for real estate professionals specifically. Where do these two worlds tend to overlap in ways people don't expect?
Commercial versus personal, you said?
Yeah, a
Or,
commercial versus personal. Yeah.
a lot of times you're using your personal auto, and you're out there using it for business, and you don't realize that a personal auto policy and a commercial auto policy don't function the same. And, you know, one thing can negate coverage on a personal auto policy whenever you're using it for business. And if you don't understand that or know that or have somebody look at your policies, you can have a gap there. Um, there's a lot of situations where folks, you know, have a commercial exposure, but they think they can insure it with a personal policy and vice versa. So I don't know if that answers your question, but um,
Yeah, it somewhat does. So yeah, so many business owners assume their current coverage is fine until something goes wrong. So how do you approach that conversation when a client hasn't had a formal insurance review in years?
Um, I didn't hear all of that, but if somebody hasn't had a formal insurance review in a long time, the absolute first step is trying to find what it is you're paying for right now and getting copies of your policies. And those are things we ask for. Sometimes folks get confused and think that we want a copy of their policies because we want to beat their coverage by $1 or something, and that's really not our goal. Our goal is to analyze what you have, ask you questions about your exposures, recommend appropriate things based on our questions that we ask, and then look at what you've got. And, some cases we will go, hey, you've got a good policy. That's good. Maybe you do this and tweak it a little bit, but very rarely do we find somebody who has everything they need exactly the way we would do it.
Okay. Yeah. So another question I have is, with the risk environment shifting as much as it has in the recent years, what types of coverage are most underutilized by the clients you work with?
Um, I would tell you that employment practices liability is a big coverage that more folks ought to buy and they ought to utilize. Sometimes you don't realize the landmines that are out there, and that's all related to the HR side of things. An employment practices policy protects you if you have employees for hiring them, firing them, um, things like sexual harassment, and that can also be third party out to your clients, that you have employees out there working on your behalf.
Mm-hmm.
Just not paying attention to the law and maybe discriminating against somebody and you don't even know it because you're not educated on human resources. That's one thing. The other thing I see where people aren't utilizing enough coverage is, and this can be personal and commercial, and that's an umbrella liability policy. An umbrella liability policy is really that thing that sets over all of your other coverages as a backstop. So if something pays out in full on a limit, and you don't have any limits yet, and this happens a lot in the auto insurance industry, you've got a liability policy and an umbrella that will set down over that. Well, you can have a commercial umbrella or a personal umbrella. And, especially on the personal side, a lot of folks don't realize how affordable those are. You can get a lot of times $1 million plus in commercial umbrella coverage, and it's very affordable. It could be as little as $200 for an extra $1 million on your homeowners and your set over your homeowners and auto.
Okay, okay. So last question from my side, and you guys also can drop your questions in the chat or just unmute the mic. So the last question from my side is, after 32 years in this industry, what is the one piece of advice you find yourself giving the most often that people wish they had heard sooner?
Ooh, gosh, that's thought compelling. Um, hmm, just probably to a business owner, because that's most of where I work is in the business owner
Mhm.
space. Just buy more liability insurance, buy more liability more umbrella liability, because the judgments and the payouts on the lawsuits now are so much more than they ever were years ago. And I find myself telling folks, if you have a nice balance sheet, balance sheet protection is very important. The other coverage that I recommend a lot, that a lot of people don't think about, is business income coverage. You can insure your business income, your net income, your ongoing expenses in a commercial property policy for your business. And so that's always the coverage triggers a peril, because a property policy is, it's a tornado, a fire, a vandalism, things that could injure your business. A lot of folks don't think about buying business income coverage to go along with their property. And that's the thing sometimes that'll keep the doors open.